your favourite cricket team better than those who do. But no one is going to let you do that. So why not try Wicket Cricket Manager to satisfy that urge? Pick your nation, pick your league, pick your players, and yell at them when they do poorly. You can find it in the links below or by searching for Wicket Cricket Manager in your app store today. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. Welcome to Wagon Wheel. I'm Jarrod Kimber. Oh, although I see I've got the last video frame up here, but a huge thank you to everyone for checking out all the different videos that we've been doing today and podcasts and everything else. But this is the normal show. I was gonna say, is it the flagship show? I suppose it's not the flagship show, but it's certainly the one of the most consistent ones that we've done. Probably the first video podcast we did. Yeah, it is. It's the first video podcast we did. So if you haven't been here before and you're new because the World Cup's on and you're hanging out, what we essentially do on this show is we look at questions from the audience. So we have a Patreon, and people on the Patreon send questions in beforehand. It's the, whatever it is, the middle tier one and above that you can ask questions on. And there's also other things on the Patreon, like the Discord channel and ad-free podcasts and random notes from me occasionally, Q&As as well, chats with me, phone chats, all sorts of things. But you can also put your comments up in the YouTube channel as well. If we can get to them, we always will. It's much easier to get to the super chats, but you don't have to super chat. It's lovely if you do, but you don't have to super chat. Just put anything in. I can see there's already a few comments in there as well. So thanks to Amwesh, Max, All Things Cinema Podcast, Keshuv. But let's get on with the show, and we'll start with the questions from the Patreon members, which starts with Will. Well, this is a nice punchy one to start with. Why is the BCCI so incompetent at organising venues, schedules, outfields? So I covered this in one of the shows the other day. I can't remember which one it was now, but essentially the BCCI should not be running this tournament. And I don't mean that in a way of, oh, the BCCI is terrible, but I don't think any major cricket board should run a World Cup because a World Cup is so different to anything else that you run. So from that point alone, the minute that they wanted to do it, and I don't think they're the only board, I think England might have done it before. I'm trying to think if there's some others. Quite often it does go really horribly wrong. And the reason is that the ICC is an events organization. They are used to doing events. Bilateral series are nothing compared to this. It's not even comparable. All right. Think of the amount of teams that are over there, the amount of press, different places, the amount of TV crew, sponsors that you have to do. Literally, the ICC have to go out and make sure that no one is selling merchandise outside the ground that contradicts any copyrights. All this sort of stuff that really, during most bilateral series, doesn't exist. You don't have to worry about languages. A couple of years ago, Afghanistan had a press conference, and the person they brought up only spoke. Oh God, I can't remember what language it was. He spoke. I know he spoke Urdu and I don't know why the thumb came up. Urdu and Farsi, maybe. I can't remember which was his main language, but he didn't speak English, and Afghanistan didn't allow him to speak Urdu. There's no one in the press conference from Afghanistan to speak his native language. There weren't even any Pakistani or Indian journalists there that could help with the Urdu. We literally had to go over into a corner and get the person that did speak Urdu from ICC staff to translate, so we could get 5 minutes of content out of this player. So these things, there's no way the BCCI will ready for all that. We've seen with the IPL how much they struggle, and they don't fully operate the IPL, right? That is also operated by IMG. It's a really tough thing to do these tournaments. They are not particularly easy. The ICC has a lot of money, but it doesn't have, football World Cup money, right? And I think it would be fair to say that Cricket World Cup is probably more political as well. There's lots of different things that go on in all these different places. That explains organizing venues. The schedules is because India do schedules later than I would say any country in the world. It's terrible at doing schedules and always has been, and they should have just been forced into dates. The outfields, I don't think anyone can excuse that. Shouldn't be in a position where we have World Cup outfields that could cause injuries to players. It's hopefully no player gets injured, but they're not safe. And I would be very upset if I was a player having to go out there knowing that I'm only doing it so it doesn't upset some other board, some other member, some other whatever interested party. I'd be very upset. But yeah, but the general point of the organizing is that they're not organizers. That's not what the BCCI do for big events. They do organize sort of other things, but not big events. And they're really hard, these things. Will says, any thoughts on the shock early elimination of Australia from the Rugby Union World Cup? It's the first time hearing of it. I don't know. I'm from Melbourne. We don't care. Wallabies? Something like that. Is George Gregan still playing? Ben says, we have a spider cam. We have spider cam. We have, as called by Comedy Genius, the robot. But drones seem woefully underused in cricket. They could provide a perfect top-down view of the fielding positions. Why are they so? They are so relatively cheap that you could have one per fielder that is locked onto the heart monitors. They have used them before, Benin. In fact, really early on, I think it was called the Foxcopter in Australia. Players don't like them above their heads. I feel a lot safer with the spider cam, although spider cams hit at least 2 players I can think of. But they do feel a lot safer with spider cam than they do with the drones. That's a big part of it, I think. Also, spider cam is apparently smoother and safer and easier. Well, not easier actually, but smoother and safer and works better in a certain way. It's got more of a safety element to it. There was another reason that someone told me, and I'm not sure what the other reason is, but I think there's a third thing. Look, they could certainly do it, and I'm sure they'll do it one day, but I think, the spider cam has obviously done pretty well to begin with, and so they're going to continue with that for a while. Ben, again, also about doubles here. People often call 2 teams the GOAT test teams, 1980s Windies and early 2000s Australia. It could only be one GOAT, so who is it? Well, I mean, that's not true, is it? We call everything a GOAT these days. It's a really interesting way of doing it. I was also, by the way, someone put a comment on this question saying 1948. You can't compare the Australian 1948 team to these 2 teams just because they weren't around. There was one series. What these teams did was, especially the West Indies, over such a long time, even Australia, what they did. West Indies went for longer, had more draws, didn't have a spinner. So there are weaknesses there. Australia was much better at winning games. Certainly struggled a lot with India, despite the fact that India weren't like a powerhouse themselves at that point. It's a good question. I probably lean towards Australia was better at their peak than the West Indies, but the West Indies reign went on for so long, it would be hard to argue that isn't a more impressive feat. But then the other side of it is Australia did it when it was slightly more modeled. There were more teams, there were better teams. You had to play more often. I mean, I don't have an answer. It'd be interesting to see how they would go if they had played each other at their peaks, but then you have to work out which team represents its peak. And should Australia would have a stronger peak, you would have thought, just because it has, Warne, McGrath. Not a stronger peak, maybe that's the wrong way of putting it, but it's easier to find Australia's peak. Whereas, like the West Indies, I don't even know how you put that team together. You've got Marshall, you've got Garner, then you probably need Ambrose, and then Holding. Or is that the Australian team? It feels a little bit easier because it was kind of one generation. McGrath, Warne, Gillespie, Lee, probably, right? But yeah, I would think just because of the longevity, the West Indies is a more impressive, and because they had no, Cricket Australia was professional in their own. The West Indian players were professional, but West Indies cricket was not. So to be able to keep that up as an amateur team, probably one of the early great global black sporting teams as well, right? Like there's doing it in a world where not all the countries are particularly open to you or particularly happy with your existence. All those things make it trickier, I would have thought, than Australia. Oh my God. Oh, there we go. Bloody Blogger says, over a period of 144 days, the 1948 Invincibles 17-man squad played 5 test matches, 4 wins, 1 draw, and 34 mostly first-class matches, 25 wins and 9 draws. You are given a time machine to bring back a squad of 17 current players in order to replace the opposition teams which the Invincibles faced in each of their 39 matches. Your team will have to follow the rules of the time and only use equipment that was available back then. How well would your team face with 1 month preparation? Invincibles wouldn't win a game. Wouldn't even be close. And that's not to say the Invincibles weren't incredible, and they deserve their credit. It was a brilliant team. They were playing weakened England team, of course, but they were a brilliant team. I think they would have been a brilliant team against a full-strength peak England team as well. But almost no one in 1948 Invincibles is ever faced someone 6'8" bowling at 90 miles an hour before. I mean, no one in the Invincibles had ever faced anyone of that height at that speed, right? Maybe, and I'm being very friendly here, some players in the Invincibles had faced someone who had bowled a couple of balls at 90 miles an hour. I don't personally believe it, but it is possible. So that would be an issue. The only thing I'd have to do is go back to the 1948 Invincibles and have a look if you had any wickets that were wet, because that would be a huge. You can't prepare modern players for that. It's just, it's something they don't have to deal with. It's it's just not the same. Even if a cover might occasionally leak, or they might have a net that's a little bit damp or whatever, it's absolutely nothing. But if you're talking about, I don't know how those batters of that period would be able to handle the bowlers who are that much faster. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is that if you took modern cricketers from today back, they would struggle a little bit with uncovered wickets at times, although pretty flat uncovered wickets also at times. And they might struggle a little bit more with the back foot no ball law and the different kinds of trajectories and everything else. But the advantages on the other side are just so massive. The power of the modern cricketers and everything else. I just can't see how 1948 Invincibles would go out against anyone. James says, scoring rates in white ball cricket have exploded in the last 20 to 30 years. And with a few exceptions like scoops and ramps, the shots being played are relatively conventional. Has there been particular technical or tactical innovations behind this advancement, or are we seeing the effect of specialization? The batters most capable of playing this way are the ones being picked without regard to their red ball record. A bit of both, something else entirely. When it was first played, it was played in a way that wasn't really maximizing strike rate. So once teams start to think about that, that changes. If you want to look at it from an evolutionary point of view, the first thing is the Jarrod Kimber hitting the ball over cover's head over and over again and taking 2. That wasn't something that you did in Test cricket. That instantly brings more runs to the table. Then you've got Australia running between. Australia had always been aggressive runners between wickets in Test cricket. They took that to a different level. So now you've got players chipping over the top and trying to run 2s all the time, no matter where they can, stealing singles. You then go to the Lance Klusener era of the power hitting coming in, where people understand that actually there is a way to consistently hit the ball very, very hard over a long period of time. Bats get bigger, professionalism comes into cricket. So not only are people holding bats that are heavier because they're stronger, the athletes that we have in cricket are now 24 hours a day professional athletes. And while that improves the bowling as well, of course, what it means is that it's easier to hit boundaries at that point. The field is opened up, so you can't have I reckon by 1987, teams didn't always have a third man back. Now, part of that was because it was in Asia. By 1992, it's a bit more 50-50. By 96, 99, teams are, Neil Johnson plays a bunch of like ramp type shots against Australia. Is it in the World Cup or just around the World Cup? Obviously, Marillier's already done it as well. So this shot is coming through. By 2003, fine leg and third man are almost up automatically at times, which what that means is that you're covering all the power positions, but now even leg lances and, Arjuna Ranatunga running the ball down fine, all these sorts of shots are opening up, because before you hit boundaries where your best shot was, which was most players would have been generally over deep mid wicket, it might have been straight. You might have got some guys who were really good slashing through the offside. As ODI cricket goes, people start to develop. So I think the most interesting shot in the history of one-day cricket is not the scoops and the ramps, although those are fascinating. It's the lofted cover drive, a shot that really you have to make a real effort to hit in the air, traditionally, because of the front elbow and the way that we played it. And that was completely changed. So all those things have changed. Then teams start to score more runs. So other teams look for methods to score more runs. The playing conditions have changed. The amount of balls we have, the power plays have changed. T20 comes along. So there's millions of different things. Specialization, as you say, certainly has a part of that. But I think test players hit the ball harder now than they ever did. In fact, you go back and have a look at old footage. Test players definitely hit the ball harder now than they ever have before. So there's so many different changes in why things have gone forward. Josh says, last week I was going to ask if Cole McConkie should have been in New Zealand side over Rachin Ravindra because he's better white ball batter and bowler. Am I an idiot? I can't answer that for you, Josh. Look, I think New Zealand rate Rachin Ravindra higher than everyone else, and they've had a pretty good track record of recent times of deciding that someone is worthy of international cricket, bringing them in, and sometimes you look at them and go, what? This guy? And it works. And I think we have to give them a little bit more credit than I would say most other teams at the moment, because they have had so much success over that time. Now, that doesn't mean they're always going to be right. And it doesn't mean that Cole McConkie, is it McConkie or McConkie? I thought it was McConkie. Have I got his name wrong? How many Coles? Yeah, McConkie. Scared me there, Josh. Thought I was going crazy. I'm not an expert in Cole McConkie. I know that there are some people that think he's a very good limited player. I'm just having a look at his record here. 37 first-class average. Done well in a couple of ODIs that he's played in. And bowling in list A cricket. Let's have a look. Yeah, he's still a part-timer. So he's got a bowling average of 46 in one-day cricket. So they think that what they're trying to breed in New Zealand, which is very different to a lot of other places. India don't need to do this. Australia's thinking about it and toying with it a little bit. England is really going all in on role definition, whereas New Zealand's very good at finding players that can play multiple roles. Like we know Devon Conway could bat 1 to 5, right? Daryl Mitchell can probably bat 1 to 6. Will Young 1 to 4. They've got a lot of players who are very, very Todd Latham probably 1 to 5. A lot of players who are very, very flexible. And I think that's another reason they like Rachin Ravindra. And they'll prove right. They needed a top order player. And I would assume, without getting too much into the stats, that McConkie is probably more of a down the order player, although I have to have a look at his first class record to be sure of that. So you want cover, and it's the Joe Denley rule. When England had Joe Denley, and David Milan's a very good example of this as well. And it's why Harry Brook didn't quite fit into their original squad plan, because they're trying to cover everything. This is why you should have longer, deeper squads. Although if New Zealand had a deeper squad, I'm not sure Rachin Ravindra would have played, but that's a very funny side effect of that. But that's why you should have deeper squads, so that you don't need to pick a player who's not as good but can cover more roles. You really want to pick 3 spare batters in a squad. 1 for the top, 1 for the middle, and 1 lower down the order. That would be the ideal situation. With Rachin, they probably thought what they had was someone who could bat 6 and 7, 1, 2, 3, and wouldn't be terrible if he had to bat 4 or 5. They've got lucky, and I don't mean that in a they picked the guy, they've trained him and everything else, but they've got lucky in the fact that he could have gone up the order and not done very well. Struggled a little bit with his new role, nicked off a couple of times, and everyone's like, why'd you pick that guy? Where's Cole? What's that Cole we've been hearing so much about? Josh says, in ODIs, how good would a batter need to be if he had an infinite average but a strike rate of only 70? He would be poor. I mean, what that would give you is, it would mean that at the other end, you're playing a 25 over game. So if you're going at a strike, I need to do the math on this. What is it? It's 300 balls, so 150 balls, right, per innings. Yeah, that's right. Times, what did we say? 0.73. No, would you say 0.70? God, get that right. So 150 times 0.7. So you're looking at 105. So it'd be 105. So if the other 25 overs, you would need to score, because he's not going out. Right? That batter is literally playing the entire innings every time. So anyone else would have to score in the 25 overs. If you wanted to be a par score, yeah, so you've got 105 at one end. Let's say you wanted your average score to be 300, so that's 195 by 25. So you'd have to score at 8 runs and over at the other end, but knowing that you wouldn't lose any wickets. But here's the thing: no one would be able to do that, because obviously no one would keep their wicket intact every single time. But if you knew that going in, that would allow you to stack the rest of your lineup with Andre Russell type players, guys, Shahid Afridi type players, Josh Butler, Liam Livingston, Glenn Maxwell type players, because you could then you could make a really good a risky batting lineup around them, because at one end you're not going to lose any wickets, and so you're willing to lose wickets at a slightly higher rate at the other end. Whether any team would have enough players of that ability in their top 6 or 7, so you've already lost one batter, so it would have to be, so you've only got 5 specialist batters left in most lineups, and so if you had 5 guys at the other end and they all average 30, it's getting risky. I'm not sure it works. It's a great exercise though. Lots of fun. Swami Nathan says, is Santner's lack of wickets akin to Rashid Khan's lack of wickets? Can it be explained by batters taking the safe approach of milking singles, with the Dutch game being exception, or is it a lack of wicket talent? He's taken wickets before, so no. He's not getting defended like Rashid Khan or Sunil Narine. Most finger spinners, I think you'll find, don't have good wicket-taking records in ODI cricket or T20 cricket. I don't think that's an accident. This World Cup will be slightly different, partly because it's being played in India. But in general, I think you'll find that finger spinners don't take wickets, and that has been going on since the 80s. I don't have much data on the 70s, but certainly since the 80s. Oh, sorry, Nathan again. How did coaches and selectors mislabel generational batting talent like Jayasuriya and Smith and start them off as part-time spinner and lower order batter? Okay, so the most important thing here is no one in Australia thought that Steve Smith wasn't a batter. They maybe thought his batting wouldn't translate to the international level in a, first class, really good player, not right for thing. But the whole thing of him starting as a player, I mean, look at the amount of players that Australia picked. Marcus North, Cameron White, Steve Smith, Marnus Labuschagne. Am I missing another one? I feel like I'm missing another one. These guys all played as bowlers, even though some of them were in the top 6. But they all played as bowlers because Australia needed spin bowling options. Like no one in Australian cricket I had ever met had ever said that Steve Smith was a better bowler than he was a batter. Right? They got a bit excited because he took a bag of wickets, but I think he was still averaging 47 with a ball at that point. Like it wasn't. Jayasuriya is really different because he's a really late developing player. I don't know if I have his first class. I don't know if I've looked at his early first class record. But I looked at this the other day. I should get Cheyenne on the podcast. But I sent it to Cheyenne the other day. His record in the first however many ODI games is dreadful. And he bats opening, he bats first drop, he bats middle order, he bats lower order. They batted him everywhere. They thought he could play. They were desperate to get a guy in who they thought had a bit of bowling talent into that side. And they were right. Eventually, it was a big reason why they won the World Cup. But he couldn't make any runs anywhere he went. So I don't think your point on those particular people are wrong. But Azhar Ali, Mark Richardson, Ravi Shastri, probably missing a couple of others out there, are certainly players who showed, who you would have thought had the attributes that could have translated to their particular skill, but weren't being given the opportunities. Like Mark Richardson bats 10 and 11, and no one even suggests he could bat. Shastri takes a long time for him to sort of work his way up the order as well. And I forget who the other player was I said, but it does. Azhar Ali. So Azhar Ali makes a fairly early transition. But I remember, and I'm not sure, I haven't gone back and had a look at the records here, but I remember that it was always said that David Boone was picked partly for underage cricket because he could bowl. You're talking about people who really understand cricket at a young age. So Stuart Broad, Simon, is much probably a better one than anyone else you've said here. Stuart Broad was thought to be a batting all-rounder when he was 16. He bowled little juicy medium paces. No one really took his bowling all that seriously, although they thought it was a cool second skill for him to have. But everyone thought he was going to be a batter. He had these long, elegant strokes. Goes to Australia at 16. Gets, by his own words, essentially just gets sledged until he just like, that's it, I'm going to bowl as fast as I can. That's the birth of the Stuart Broad that ends up being an international cricketer. So does that mean it was wrong for all the other people not to be able to do that? And it's Stuart Broad's one. This is a slightly different situation, but Darren Gough was playing in a first-class game, and Richie Richardson was his captain. And he was bowling like, what England seamers do. 80 mile an hour, little swingers, whatever. And Richie Richardson's like, just bowl quick. Just bowl quick. Sometimes things like that completely open up a player, and they make them think about things very, very different. And so it's hard for you to know as a coach what that thing is and whether you will break a very talented player. How many questions are you guys putting today? So I've got like 3 guys. I've asked like 10 questions. Something Nathan again says, I have a theory that the reason for the jarring commentary from Asian players to commentators is due to their lack of college education where you get to refine your language skills. Centre players don't suffer this since English is their first and only language. No, I don't think it's the university thing. I mean, I haven't been to university. I feel like I can talk okay. No, I don't. I know what you're saying. It's my first language. I think it's the first language thing. I think if you're commentating or you're broadcasting, if whatever language you dream in or you think in your mind in is your first language. There are some people who can switch between them all and they're fluent in all of them. That's fine. But for the vast majority of people, they're almost live transcribing it in their head into a different language. And in commentary, that sounds horrible. The other thing is that people who don't speak it as their first language generally cling on to cliches and certain phraseology that actually that is jarring. So yeah, I think it's much more to do with that. And from the players I know whose their first language isn't English, they would admit a very similar thing. It's not quite that it's just taking that little bit longer. If you ever listen to someone who hasn't played a lot of cricket do ball by ball, it's a very, very similar thing. Because if I do ball by ball, I know 90 to 95% of everything I need to know. Most professional cricketers who do it exactly the same. Right, or even higher than me, right? Just instantly know, could see his wrist come down the back of that ball, and you could see where the seam was aiming. That's an outswing. It didn't swing, but that's what he was trying to bowl, right? And took the outside part of the bat, and that went to backward point. If you don't know any of that, and you have to be an expert yourself to pick this up, but when you're doing ball by ball with someone who doesn't know those sorts of things, they don't know what to say with the delivery, and then the ball, and they'll say, and that is hit into the offside. And it's gone to backward point. It's not quite as jolty as that, but it's jolty. And it's a similar sort of thing. So if you don't know the language of cricket, ball by ball is very hard. If you're not speaking your first language, commentary is very hard. It's very hard anyway. Oh my God, Simon Nathan, what's going on here? The Dutch soccer team in the 70s took football forward with an idea called total football. Please take a stab at constructing a total cricket team from history. Well, the total cricket team is England when Adil Rashid's batting at 11. Because Adil Rashid could bat in the power play as a hitter. Don't think you would use him that way by that age, but he certainly could have. Liam Plunkett could have been someone that would have gone up the order. Ben Stokes could have taken the new ball. Joe Root could have did bowl with the new ball. So that would have been it. The T20 team, I would have said, more than the one-day team. But I'd have to go back and have a look. The only other one would be 1999 South Africa, because they could bat to 9, and they could, and South Africa could and did have 11s where Pat Simcox was at number 11, where he had first class hundreds as well. Yeah, Hardsie Cronje would have been bowling, Callis would have been bowling. Don't know if McMillan would have played in any of those, but they could have constructed wild 11s if they wanted to. Bob Woolmer was actually weirdly conservative with what he could have done. Lucky I didn't have that team. Ben says, QDK seems a very difficult character, but clearly a wonderful talent, and I'm not sure South Africa managed very well. If he had been born in any of the big 3 teams, how would his career have moved differently? I don't know if I see him as a difficult character. He's different to other players, and I think he thinks about life slightly differently, and is maybe a bit more see ball, hit ball in his life than some other people are, which might rub people up the wrong way at times. I think that's all fair when we talk about QDK. I'm not sure that kind of person would be any different in a big 3 nation. I don't think South Africa have handled him badly. I think he's made a lot of runs. He's played well. The captaincy was the only thing I thought they did horribly wrong, just because he was never going to keep that job and he didn't want that job, and he didn't last very long in that job. Vika says, how big a role does fitness play in cricket? Because Virat is so fit, would that give him 1 to 2 extra years? A lot of fans, including me, criticize players like Rohit Pant and a few others for their weight, which they put on in the last few years, and they were not like that before. Is that a fair criticism or not? Because we think that it definitely affects their batting at 1 or 2%. It's a really interesting question, this, because when you are tired, you make poorer decisions. And so if you look at the absolute best batters of all time, I don't think you'll find that many of them who are not uber fit. But there's in that sort of just that level below, there are actually a lot of batters who are there who are not fit. So is that what the difference is? You look at Bradman, for instance, or Steve Smith, those sorts of players, they were incredibly fit. And I do think over a long period of time that helps. What I would say is that weight is not actually fitness. And I've talked to a lot of players over the years, fit players and unfit players, about this. And even the fit players will say, this guy does as much preparation and work in the gym as I do. He eats a perfectly respectable diet, but he can't get rid of this part of fat. Aaron Finch is the perfect example of, Aaron Finch used to end up with I think most people would have said that Aaron Finch was a slightly unathletic body. But when you talk to the Vic boys about Aaron Finch, they would say that his body fat percentage, pinch tests, were actually pretty level, because he didn't have an inch of body fat on his legs, but he had a lot of body fat on his upper body. So is he fit or not fit? Right? So that's why, just looking at weight is not don't get me wrong, it's a very, very good predictor, but it doesn't always mean the most. And also, in particular, there are going to be particular roles in cricket. You're going to want bigger people, right? And we're already starting to see that, especially in T20 cricket and one-day cricket. You probably prefer someone who is more solid, who can hit more sixes because they're a bigger frame and they're stronger, than someone who is thin and can steal you twos in a T20 game. I think fitness, I remember talking to a bowler, former international bowler, who told me fitness didn't matter at all. As long as he could bowl, his 4 spells a day, he'd be fine. And I said, there's no way, if that's the way you're looking in, that you're not holding yourself back and you're not bowling at full speed all the time. Because otherwise you wouldn't be able to bowl your 4 spell because you weren't fit. You've just said that by your own, your own words. So I do think, if you think about it that way, it holds players back. However, James Harden has certainly, and Luka Doncic, I'm trying to think of a footballer who's not, we've seen footballers before, players in all sports. Sometimes tennis players are not as fit as other tennis players. You certainly see that in the women's game sometimes. A lot of these sports are still about how you read the game, your individual skills, your ability to repeat actions and all that sort of stuff. If you have all those better than someone else that's fit, but if you give me a player who is absolutely fit and is working on their game just as much as someone else who is not fit over a long period of time, I would think there would be a difference. Whether it's 1 or 2%, I can't tell you. And the thing about having extra years at the end of your career, Vickers, the problem with that stat is I would be sure if everyone was fit over a long period of time, you would get that. We're already starting to see that with, the tennis players and Tom Brady and Jimmy Anderson and these sorts of athletes coming through. However, if you get a knee injury when you're 31 and you do your anterior cruciate or you do your Achilles, you might never come back anyway. So it's not a safeguard. It just means if 50 players were all very fit and 50 players weren't fit, you would expect the 50 players who weren't fit to not last as long. It's little things like where weight can really wear you down is, ankles, knees, specifically, so, and once your knees go as a batter, your bat path can go with that. So there are actual issues that can come from being a little bit heavier, carrying more weight when you're running and fielding and everything. James says, in a Champions of Champions World Cup featuring each winning team in history, which 4 teams make the semi-finals and who wins the World Cup of World Cups? Okay, so there's 2 ways of answering this because it goes back to the 1948 question. And the 1975 team wouldn't qualify for this tournament. Not that they didn't have good cricketers, but cricket's just moved on so much from that point that they wouldn't qualify. But the 1975 West Indies team, not the best West Indies team, but was a really, really good team. So if you look at it from an era perspective, I would almost pick the last 4 or 4 of the last 5 teams or 4 of the last 6 teams and go from that perspective. But if you're looking at the most dominant teams, I think 79 West Indies was a really, really interesting team. What else do we have? Then your next team. I mean, Pakistan, I want to say Pakistan in 92, but actually they had a pretty poor tournament. They probably had the worst tournament of any team that's ever won. The Sri Lanka team I really, really like. Whether that would have translated as well outside of Asia, I don't have the stats to hand, so I don't know. 99 Australia, probably not, but would be a really, really strong team. 2000 Australia doesn't have 2003 doesn't have Warner. 2007 doesn't have Warren. 2003, I kind of feel like a lot of the Australian best players are more in their peak. So I think 2003 is better than 2007, although I have to go back through the full lineups. I'd like Gillespie to be available for that, even if Bickle did very, very well in that tournament. Where are we up to? 2011. That's a good team, should win in most places. So if you've got 79, 2003 or 2007, 2011, they got 2015 Australia. I don't think that's as strong as the other 2 Australias. And then you've got 2019, who, again, I think England had a pretty good World Cup. I suppose the final makes it look slightly worse. I would like to see 79 West Indies go up against 2019 England and whichever Australian team you think is the strongest against 2011 India. I think, but then what do I do with Sri Lanka? I think those are the 4 best teams. Sri Lanka might be better than 79 West Indies. But if you're asking me what the best team is, it's probably one of the Australias of 2003, 2007. I probably think 2003, but I'm not positive on that. Miraj says, the bat sensors are being used by a few players. Or would you ever get players to use them? And why do they work? And why don't they? Which batters would benefit the most out of it? Yeah, I think quite a few players are using them now. That sometimes you can't see them as well. Some of them are stickers and stuff. There's all these different things that they use out there. Look, it's just more information. I think you can tell players if they're opening the face too early or closing the face too early. Bat speed, bat plane, all those sorts of things are really helpful. Which players would help? I mean, I think it helps all batters, really. I don't think there's a kind of batter that it wouldn't help. I would think that it would be very helpful to people to work out their flaws against, let's say you were struggling against left arm seam. There's something about your bat path that is different against left arm seam than right arm seam, and other players aren't doing that. I think those are the sorts of things that you would be using. Let's have a quick break. And then after the break, oh my God, there's so many comments in there. What's going on? I've got a couple more Patreon, but then I'll get to the comments as well. You're listening to Wagon Wheel with Jarrod Kimber, and where's Surfshark? Where's my Surfshark ad, everyone? I can't find it. Oh, Paul Surfshark. Well, they're out.
A few years ago, I had a panic attack after ESPN Cricinfo made me their global writer. I'd earned that position, but I also felt like a fraud at the time because I didn't really understand how I wrote. I understand that there was a process and gears and different styles and things, but how it all came together felt a little bit random. And so I began to panic like a golfer with a natural swing, worried one day I'd just end up with the yips. And would my career be over? So I took my writing apart piece by piece until I understood it. And then I figured out I could teach others all the mistakes I had learned. So I started an online course where I tried to make it as cheap as possible so people like me would be able to afford it. It's called Fans with Laptops, and heaps of people from around the world have used it so far, from first-time writers all the way through to professionals trying to improve. I started with a simple plan to make each writer the best they could be. And from the feedback I've received over the years, it seems like the course does that. But after COVID, my career changed. I came to YouTube, started podcasts, wrote emails, and formed a new career on my own going forward. So I now had something else to offer, the multimedia side of things, social media and everything else. Not to mention that I was building everything up as an independent. And so I added all of that to my course. So if you have ever wanted to work in sports as a writer or podcaster, making videos or anything else, Fans with Laptops is the place to start. If you think you qualify as a fan and you have a laptop and you want to work in sport, click on the link.
All right, welcome back. There's a couple of questions, although someone's just putting crap in their room as well, literally in this case. What else we got with T20 Focus? Oh, that's interesting. All right, let's just get through the Patreon ones. Don't know why there were so many on Patreon this week. Cam says, how sore must Hayley Matthews' shoulders be from carrying the West Indies through their recent T20 series against Australia? Surely must be one of the all-time great individual performances in what is otherwise a very weak team. It's Andy Flower, wasn't it? Who else? I want to say Fazal Mahmood, but that's not fair. It's not even Murali. They had slightly more. But Andy Flower is maybe a very good example of a player single-handedly doing that. But we've seen really good players have incredible series like that before as well. So I suppose it has happened a few times. But she was incredible. Niran says, what do you think of the Sri Lanka South Africa pitch? There was nothing in it for bowlers. Do these pitches make 50 over game better or worse? I find this interesting because it hasn't been a batting heavy tournament so far. And we've seen lots of pitches that have helped bowlers. We've seen lots of pitches that have favored bowlers. Isn't that what we want? Like, I think it's one of the great things about having it in a place, keeping it on turf, is that we don't quite know. So sometimes you will get really batting friendly pitches and sometimes you won't. So I don't have an issue with that at all. If every pitch was like that, I wouldn't like it. But if every pitch was like the India-Australia pitch, I might not like that either. Aurojyoti says, last World Cup, Dhawan got injured and India moved Rahul up the order to replace him. Would they have been better off keeping Rahul lower down the order and bringing in someone else to open? Rahul saved them in this game. Maybe it could have in the last semi-final. I mean, that's a big what if, isn't it? You put it this way. I can't even remember who came in for Dhawan. I need to go back and check that. But whoever came in for Dhawan could have made 180 or could have been the player that wins the game. Or you could have moved KL Rahul and completely ruined your middle order by doing that as well. Do you know what I mean? That's not a question that is easily answered because you're then putting KL Rahul in the position where he's now got the ball moving around early on as well. He's going to be in just as... I mean, New Zealand bowled really, really well. Richard says, India struggles to beat New Zealand in World Cups. What do you think are the things that New Zealand can exploit or plan for to beat India this time? One thing I would say is I've seen a lot of this of, Sri Lanka never beat Pakistan and India never lose to Pakistan and this one. And there's another one, I think, as well. You would have to look at the overall records. I don't think there's any team that struggles massively. With those sorts of things overall. I would never look at, India don't beat New Zealand in World Cups. Do they need to do something different in the World Cup? I think India need to play a format of cricket that exploits their best, the best parts of their game. I don't think they need to go in worrying about anything specific with New Zealand. New Zealand and India are both very, very confident teams at the moment, although by the time that game happens, maybe things will have changed. But they'll have their plans and they'll do it. But unless you had, I'm trying to think of what it would be, unless you had a situation where you had a country that really struggled with tall bowlers and always lost to Australia, I don't know, like, what are we really saying that this New Zealand team does that would bother India? Like, I don't see anything in that. So I think you would just look at your matchups, look at what your team does best and go into the game. I wouldn't assume they'd do anything special. Vivek says, not sure if this is a consistent thing or just from one game. Is it Kuldeep's dip that causes batters to play him off the back foot more often? Or do international players go back to buy themselves more time to react off the surface? I don't remember seeing anyone dancing down the track to make Kuldeep's deliveries at the point of pitching. Well, he's bowling quicker, Vivek, so that is a part of it. I don't think you can. I don't think you can, move away from that as a reason. They might be trying to give themselves slightly more time just because they don't pick him as well as they do right arm wrist spinners. I know it sounds really weird, but when a left arm wrist spinner bowls a wrong-un, partly because I think the way they set up is more wrong and dependent, but also there's something about flipping the image that seems to bother batters' minds a little bit. Might mean that they want to play back a little bit, but it could be his dip. The thing with wrist spinners is they put more overspin on the ball than finger spinners do, so they do get more dip. So it is a very, very possible. Ian says, if the predictions of this being the last but one ODI World Cup are correct, do you think this will reverse the downward trend of Test cricket outside the big three, or will cricket essentially become a T20 sport? Yeah, I actually think Test cricket has been doing okay over the last couple of years everywhere. Until you have a solid infrastructure around it that means it makes money all the time, you're always going to have an issue with it. So it's always going to be there. But if ODI cricket does disappear altogether, I would actually assume that helps Test cricket in some ways. But if you really want to safeguard Test cricket, there's a number of different things you can do, or ODI cricket, but they would have to be separated. You can't have the people who are obsessed with T20 running Test cricket and one-day cricket. That will be an issue going ahead if that doesn't change. Manon says, your favorite matches or moments from cricketing history to watch back? Probably the last over of the Tide Test in 60-61 at the Gabba. I think if you've never seen it, I'm pretty sure there's extended highlights online. Australia's cruising the wrong way, but playing brilliantly, got this great partnership, and then with about 8-9 balls to go, it just falls apart. And then, the final run out is incredible. I think that's probably one of my favorite. Yeah, I mean, I've been watching all the old World Cups. I've really enjoyed it. In fact, I feel like I've learned, it's funny, ODI cricket might be on its way out, but I feel like I've learned more watching the old World Cups and why things changed when they did and how they changed in one-day cricket from going back and having a look at that. And then, there's some great old performances, Collis King and Gary Gilmore. I saw, oh my God, I'm going to forget his name, but the Indian player who makes the 250s in 83, Yashpal? Is it Yashpal? I think it is. Play an extraordinary shot in one of the old clips. And that's what I really like. It's probably not going back and seeing great moments. It's going back and watch something and going, wait a minute, we were told that they all blocked every single ball and just, pushed into covers for one occasionally. And you go back and you see improvisation from batters and, see weird things from bowlers and, all those sorts of things. That's the stuff I really love watching. Plus, funny things like the streaker. Well, is he a streaker? The pitch invader that was complaining to Sunil Gavaskar about him batting too slow. Hamza said, why did Liam Plunkett bowl cross seam bouncers rather than regular bouncers? What makes them more effective? Cross seam bouncer means that if it hits the smooth bit, it will skid, which means it's harder to get away from. More likely to hit someone. If it hits the seam, it might stick and go up a little bit, which means you will see it short and you think, well, that's a good length to hook, but it'll actually be higher, which means you've got a top edge. It's just inconsistency. That's essentially what players were looking for. And to be fair, Plunkett didn't just bowl cross-seam bounces. He bowled cross-seam everything. So he tried to hit back of the length, tried to hit the pitch as hard as he could, and then hoping occasionally he'd get one to skid, get a bottom edge onto the stumps, and occasionally one will bounce a little bit more and it'll be spooned up in the air. Hamza says, what makes Ibrahim Zadran so much better in ODIs than his fellow batters in the Afghanistani squad? What does he have that they don't have? They don't have a lot of what I would call frontline batting talent. They have a lot of incredible, I think I termed this phrase a long time ago, but they have a lot of frontline, they have a lot of number eights. I think I called them, the team of number eights many, many, many years ago. And they haven't really changed all that much from there. And what they've never been able to do, if you have a look through their entire history, is have consistent top order players. I think Ibrahim Zadran, there's a couple coming through at the moment, but you look at them and they do look like the sort of players who can average 35 to 45 in red ball cricket. I just want to, his List A average, has he played List A cricket? Yeah, so he averages 50 in ODI cricket and about the same in List A cricket. He's a consistent run scorer. Go through the history of Afghanistan cricket, they're not like that. They have a lot of all-rounders. They have a lot of talent in their batting, but more Muhammad Nabi type talent, where you're just like, yeah, you want him to bat 6, 7, 8. Well, 8's probably a bit low, but 6, 7 type players. They don't have a lot of 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's just because they haven't had the facilities. That it's not the kind of cricket that they got good at. It's not the way that their game developed over there. It will happen, but it might take some time. That's the end of the Patreon. Let me just go into the chat. Max Harris says, what if instead of net run rate, we use net wickets? Thank you for the super chat, Mac. Oh, works better if I put it on the screen. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a sport where we look at runs. I wonder if there's a way of doing a combination of net run rate and net average, which I suppose is net wickets. But I don't think we just want to do net wickets. Because if you take 8 wickets against the side and they've made 380, and then you end up on 2 for 300, I don't think we would say that's a particularly close game. So no, I don't think it works. Net average is a bit more interesting to me, I think, but I'm not sure it's needed. And which says, all-time 11 of English players born outside of England versus those inside of England. Who wins? The team inside of England would win, wouldn't it? Botham, Willis, Truman, name your older spinners, or Swanee even. You've got some good batters in the other side, but I can't think. Maybe I'm just Jofra, but he doesn't have much of a record. I can't think of many great English bowlers who were not born in England, unless I'm missing someone. So, you would have Stokes on the other side, but England could, but this team could pick Botham and Flintoff if they wanted to. So yeah, no, I think a home team would win quite comfortably. The home team? The home team. Keshav says, my question is, what's more beneficial to associate members? ODI Super League and 10-team World Cup, or 14-team World Cup and no bilaterals before? I would think it would be the ODI Super League. Look at how much better the Dutch are than they were beforehand. But I would also say that it wouldn't work if you did it that way, because bilateral cricket, I don't think you'd ever be able to play that much bilateral cricket ever again in ODIs, even in T20s. And what's the point in getting good if the other 10 teams are better than you? Do you know what I mean? If you're the 11th best team, there's a reason why World Cups and Olympics have so many athletes and so many teams in them. It's not just about the best and against the best. It is hoping that teams will continue to try and improve. You have to give more chances for that. And this is a big thing in cricket. I've talked to so many people in associate countries, and their governments all say a very, very similar thing to them over and over again of, why would we care about cricket when the governing body don't care about you, right? So it's a really big thing for that. So I do think that matters. Kelly says, have you ever knocked someone out while bowling? Yes, but not in the way you think. I knocked someone out by bowling. I was playing in a club game and I was trying to take my 5th wicket, bowling my very slow leg spin, and I bowled a horrendous full toss and it was hit straight into Shortleg's head, and Shortleg was not wearing a helmet because Australian cricket in the 90s. He got hit in the head, ball went flying up, he hit the ground, lost consciousness, catch was taken, we carried him off the field. He got consciousness back and asked us what happened. So yes, I have knocked someone out, but not in any normal way. Silver says, do you think Pakistan now have a chance for a spot in the semis after that record chase? I mean, I think they had a chance before. I think I had them as their best case scenario. I don't think I was. I mean, I still worry about their middle overs bowling, worry about their seamers a little bit. They put in one good batting performance, and it was a fantastic batting performance. I think we need to see a lot more before that changes where we think their ceiling is. But their ceiling was still, did I have them as semi-finalist or even a potential finalist? I can't remember. Like, if everything works for them, they're a really good team. I don't think that one chase changes how I think about things. Michael says, have you ever been playing bowling when you got to pick up the bowling ball and you feel that, oh, okay. That's a weird one. Rohit says, with T20 focus, is picking players for the middle overs for bat and ball a key for 50 over cricket? There seems to be plenty of T20 style players now. Yeah, I think, I wonder if teams had fully understood, maybe is the best term here, how different this was going to be and how challenging this was going to be for certain players. I still think that if you're a good T20 player, you can learn to adapt, but do you get chance to learn to adapt now? And can you go between the gears and all those sorts of different things? So yeah, like for instance, KL Rahul and Dawid Malan, who watches T20 cricket and doesn't complain about the speed at which they bat? And there are sometimes issues within one-day cricket for those players as well. But the speed at which they bat in one-day cricket doesn't matter as much as the fact that they can bat longer, and which allows everyone else to score really quick. So if you bat longer in T20 cricket, you're just chewing up so many balls, and the others have to score at like 3 runs a ball to make up for you at a certain point, right? Or you have to go crazy at the end while they're scoring at like 2.5 runs a ball. And so, yeah, I think all that is a huge difference, and the way that things go about from that perspective. But yes, it's different now, and I do think if we kept having one-day World Cups and we have a Champions Trophy and all these sorts of things going ahead, I think that's going to be a fair question going forward. Is this a player who can do it? Yeah, we've seen them average 30 in the IPL, but can they average 40 in an ODI World Cup? Because it is different, and you have to play differently and think differently. I mean, I learned more about this from Nicholas Pooran. 20-minute interview I did with him in 2019, where he was literally taking me through step by step how he's training himself how to do all this. Like, you could see him just being like, he virtually not played any list A cricket. Clearly one of their best 6 batters, has to play in the squad, and has a great tournament as well. Fantastic tournament for a young player. But he was saying to me, well, I get to this situation and what do I do and how do I think and how do I train myself to think that and how do the nets help and all these sorts of things. It's a fascinating new world we find ourselves in with that style of cricket. Anyway, thank you to everyone in the comments and everything else. If you did manage to do both lives of mine, more power to you. Huge fan. Thanks to everyone on the podcast as well. We are doing still 5 podcasts a week, but the way that the podcast is being listened to more and more all the time, we will be looking at expanding. We've got some other show ideas as well, some other co-hosts and all sorts of things in the back. So thank you to everyone for that. And if you're following us this World Cup, the podcast channel is the one that we're doing all the lives from, and the other channel is the one we're doing all the normal videos from. Please come over, watch, enjoy. And I don't always say this on Wagon Wheel, but I can promise you this. I'll see you again. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geo-block. Go to Surfshark and type my name in, KIMBER, and get 3 months free today.